All right, now we're going to start session number 3, Generative AI and Music Rights. So before we start, I'm going to actually just pass the microphone and then let you guys introduce yourself just very briefly. And then we're going to start talk, and then we'll have the discussion or answers, question and answers.
No one knows me, so we'll go right to Katie.
Hi. Hi, good afternoon. My name is KweeTiang. I am currently the Senior Vice President for Asia Public Policy for the Universal Music Group. Prior to this, I spent 6 years as the Regional Director for Asia and Pacific for IFPI. And prior to that, I spent 23 years with CZAC as its Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific, where actually I had a hand in help starting almost all of the collecting societies throughout Asia, with a couple of exceptions. Thank you.
Hi. Hello, I'm Bob CLARIDA. I'm a partner at Reitler, Kailas, and Rosenblatt, which is a law firm in New York. And I'm a copyright lawyer, which I've been doing for 30 years. I do a lot of work in music, but also in software and film and book publishing and everything else, because if it's copyright, it falls to me eventually. And before becoming an attorney, I had a career as a musician. I did a PhD in music and wrote music for some dance companies in New York, and realized that I couldn't pay the rent that way, so I went to law school. So, all right.
Hi, my name is Young Hoo Kim. People call me Young, although I'm old. So yeah, I'm a K-pop producer. Work with mainly with SM Entertainment since I was 15. Like you know, money is good with music, but I need more. So I'm also working tech as well. I do some AI, vision AI, software engineering on the side.
Thank you. And I believe Bob has a presentation to share.
Yes, we can.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. So we're going to go to Bob first, and then go to Kate.
If we can get the slides to work, otherwise.
Mind and dim the lights.
Yes, that would be a good idea to take the house lights down a little bit. And I'll set this up while you're working on getting the slides.
Your mic is not on.
Hello. So what I'm going to be talking about first, and I hope I've got some slides and some demo, but if not, we'll just talk our way through it, is just to sort of talk about what are some of the use cases in AI. What are the things that people are actually doing with AI? Because we tend to throw the term generative AI around and think it's some kind of magic box that can turn any piece of music into any other piece of music. And that's not really what it is. It does several very specific things about processing audio and generating new audio. And if we understand what those are better, maybe we'll have some concrete examples that when we talk about AI, we know sort of what it is we're talking about. And the first thing that AI does, and one of the first things that it was commercialized to do, is called stem separation, which is taking a piece of audio, a recording that's got multiple instruments and voices in it, and separating those out into their separate strands, and to make separate tracks out of all these things that are all mixed together on a record. It's sort of demixing a record. And it's something that was never possible to do with conventional audio processing. And it's been around for, you know, a number of years now. It was used a lot in the Peter Jackson film Get Back, which was the Beatles sessions and the making of Let It Be. And those tapes were a mess, and they were able to separate all the pieces out using, at the time, very sophisticated, expensive technology. That technology has gotten a lot cheaper and a lot more commonplace. And starting in around 2021, they were putting it on DJ consoles so that DJs could play any record through the console and take the drums out, take the vocals out, put a different bass line on it, with push buttons right on the console. So that technology is not brand new, it's been out there for a while. But that allows you to do all sorts of, oh great, my slides are up, that's great. So the first one, could you click ahead? Stem separation allows demixing. It is a building block technology that is really helpful in all the other AI technologies that we're going to talk about. So I've already talked about this. There are plugins that you can buy for your digital audio workstation. If you do recording on Pro Tools or Fruity Loops or Logic or whatever it is, there are plugins that will allow you to do this at home on your computer, and you don't need a $1 million computer to do this. Any laptop that can process audio can now do this. And this is just, next slide please. This is just a picture of one of the DJ consoles from a company called Serato Stems. And you see there's buttons right on the console that allow you to take things in and out of a recording in real time. And this is not a recording that the console has been trained on. This is listening to any piece of audio and saying, that's probably the vocals, that's probably the bass, that's probably the drums, and it can take them in and out. So that's pretty good. In order to do that, it has to be trained on a huge amount of content. And that raises one of the major copyright issues in AI is that use of the training data permissible under copyright law? And that's a real live issue, and people have very heated opinions about that. So that's stem separation. Once you can separate stems, then you can do other things with the stems that you've separated. In the next slide, please. AI-assisted mashups. This is something you see all over YouTube now. You can take the instrumental bed out of one song and the vocal out of another song, put them together, you've got a mashup. That's been something people have been doing for a long time. But there's technology, Melodyne is a particular plugin that is used a lot. You can use it to change the pitch and the rhythm of one of the tracks and do all sorts of fun things with it. Can we get the next slide up, please? Can we play that audio? Can you play that little speaker icon? Turn up the volume.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beautiful, neighborly day for beauty. Would you be mine? Would you be mine?
And that is
mine.
That's the Animals' House of the Rising Sun, a famous record from the 60s. And Fred Rogers, known as Mr. Rogers, is a popular children's show in the United States all through the 60s and 70s. I like that they're both wearing the same tie in this picture. They sort of coordinate. So that's an AI-assisted mashup. Mr. Rogers never sang that melody, but he did sing those words. And it's taking his audio and changing the melody and the pitch and the rhythm to make it fit nicely with the instrumental bed out of the Animals, both of which started as fully mixed recordings, which were then separated into their parts, and then the parts manipulated and put back together. Next slide, please. Voice cloning. This is the one that's been getting an awful lot of attention. Voice cloning. How does voice cloning work for AI? Well, there's different ways it can work. But often, and the ones that really sound good and that sound really convincing, often involve a large human performance element. Someone is singing the song in a voice that is similar to the voice they're trying to emulate. And then it's being processed again through AI to make it sound even more like the voice they're trying to imitate. So it starts off with someone who is singing very much like the target voice. There was a record that was big in the spring in the US that sounded just like the singer Drake and the singer The Weeknd. And they didn't sing that record, but it sounded like their voices. And the way that you get that kind of accuracy is not by just pressing some button on a machine or the machine generating those voices from scratch. A lot of the things that sound like Drake and that sound like The Weeknd in that record were put there by human beings who were imitating the way those people sing. And then AI is used as a further filter to make it, even more realistic. And there's another approach to this voice cloning that's a lot simpler. That is, there are apps out there like Voicify, for example, that say, well, we'll turn any singer into, the singer of your choice, and they have presets, and these are things that are like predetermined and plugged into the app. And I'll give you an example of that. Next slide, please. This is not Johnny Cash. This is someone who sings a lot like Johnny Cash, then further runs their voice through AI to sing something that Johnny Cash never sang. And this is over the bed of an instrumental track of Folsom Prison Blues, which is an actual Johnny Cash song. I understand the Barbie movie was not real popular in Korea. It was huge in the US. This is Johnny Cash singing a song that was in the Barbie movie called I'm a Barbie Girl. You can play that, please.
Hello, I'm not Johnny Cash. I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. Life in plastic, it's fantastic. You can brush my hair, undress me everywhere. Oh, come on Barbie, let's go party, 'cause I'm in a Barbie world.
Okay. Now this is so that's how a high quality voice clone operates. You have a human being sing it, process that through an AI filter, and it really can sound an awful lot like Johnny Cash. This is another one. This is the sort of the simple, cheap, free app kind of way to do it that Voicify does. This is the singer Jenny from Blackpink, and there's an app on Voicify. She's one of the voices that you can select. If you'll play the speaker in the middle, please. This is actually the Jenny voice through the Jenny voice cloner on Voicify. Okay, and then on the bottom right, so I thought, well, what would some other singer sound like through this Jenny voice cloner on Voicify? So I thought, well, what's another voice that's kind of like that, kind of a light, high, female dance pop kind of voice? And I thought, how about early Madonna? So if you play the one on the bottom right.
Feels like I'm going to lose my mind. You just keep on pushing my love over the borderline.
So that doesn't sound quite like Madonna. I don't know if it sounds a lot like Jenny either, but it's doing something to the voice. But I thought, what if you put a voice that's a completely different kind of voice through that Jenny filter? Is it going to sound much like Jenny? Play the one on the bottom left, please. Okay, you can stop that. Now that doesn't sound much like Jenny. It sounds a lot like Aretha Franklin, which says to me that the voice that you put into the filter is much more determinative of the outcome than what the filter is. And just as a goof, you know, just play the one up on the top left. We'll just get a few seconds of that.
But having to be spouty, you'll never pick me up. How does it live?
Okay, so that sounds a lot more like Bob Dylan than it sounds like Jenny. And I think the voice that you put in, so when you hear voice cloning, it's not some magic box that's making the voice sound so much like that voice you know. It's someone who's working really hard to imitate that and then getting the further processing. Next slide, please. Now that's all been audio processing AI. Truly generative AI is where the AI is making some of the creative decisions. And all these examples we played, the creative decisions have all been made by people, and then the AI is used as an audio tool to help realize that artistic intention. AI can generate lyrics. I'm not going to talk about that. It's obvious that AI can generate lyrics if you've played around with ChatGPT or any of these other text generators online. There's some interesting work going on with AI improvisation where the AI is actually creating melody. And can we move to the next slide, please? This is an example of AI playing jazz improvisation over chord changes for the song called Giant Steps by John Coltrane. This is a legendarily difficult set of chords to improvise over. It's really hard. And the AI has been trained to improvise over chords in the way that jazz players do. If you could play the bottom clip, please, and then fast forward to about 35 seconds. It starts to sound really persuasive about 35 seconds. Okay, So that's not in real time. That's AI playing through the chord changes, through the machine learning knows what a jazz player would do over these chords, and it's doing that. To the next slide, please. This is a really interesting example. This is real-time jazz improvisation by AI. And the slide that I'm going to show you, there's 3 components. On the right is a human performer, a young guy named Jason Lee Schultz. Has anybody bumped into Jason Lee Schultz on YouTube? He's this 16, 17-year-old kind of phenomenal musician. He was born in South Africa, now lives in the US. And he's just a wonderful musician. He's playing in real time. At the top of the screen, there's a piano keyboard that shows you what the AI is playing, and he's basically trading phrases with the AI. He'll play 4 bars, and then the AI will play 4 bars. And then in the middle of the screen is a list of what's called corpus, which tells you all the jazz musicians whose work was used to train the AI that's improvising in real time with Jason Lee Schultz. So if you could play that, please, and we'll watch a little bit of that. Okay, we can stop there. But it's really pretty amazing that, this is real call and response, and the AI is responding to what is being played into it. And then the next thing that I'm going to finish with, just as an AI use case, this is sort of full-blown generative AI, where the AI really, next slide please, text to music, where you can put in a text prompt, and it will actually generate music from the text prompt. And this is really, really hard for computers to do, and they don't always do a very good job of it, but the technology is getting much better, much faster. And by this time a year from now, I'm sure they will be putting live musicians out at work on a regular basis. Skip the next slide, please, and then the next slide. Okay, I put in a text. This is from the Google AI Test Kitchen, from the public beta of the Google AI Test Kitchen. And this is a result generated solely from a text prompt. There's no presets. It doesn't do lyrics or vocals. The prompt here was K-pop, up-tempo, major key, string section, and hip-hop, because I thought I'll throw a wild card in there, string section. And what does that come up with? Play the audio, please. And I don't know how much that sounds like K-pop, but it's up-tempo, it's major key, it's hip-hop drums, and it has a string section, so whether it's got K-pop in it or not, I'm not a judge of that. But it's really pretty amazing that with just 4 or 5 words, you get a pretty complete piece of music out of that. And if you listen to that while you're on hold on the phone or something, it would sound just like what you always hear when you're on hold on the phone. So that's it for now. I just wanted to sort of lay some groundwork about the different things that people are actually doing with AI right now, so that we can all have some sort of concrete examples to talk about. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. And Katie, please.
Great. Thank you very much. I think Bob has really set the scene from UMG. I think, of course, we see tremendous opportunities in this technology. But at the same time, I'm sure you can imagine the risks involved in this. Because as Bob also mentioned, it can put a lot of musicians, a lot of artists, a lot of composers out of work. So as you set it up, I think the first comment I want to make, or the company would like to make really, is that first and foremost, we have always been extremely supportive of technology. We have long embraced technology. Right now, we have a show running called the Avatars, which is a combination of live orchestra with avatars that are created with motion sensors and so on. We use a lot of AI in our marketing and insights. That is also what pushes the music when if you are on Spotify or Apple or Melon here, that is the technology that pushes the kind of music. Once it knows what kind of music you listen to, it pushes similar kind of music. And as George was mentioning earlier, the challenge with that, of course, is that new music gets pushed on the wayside because the AI doesn't, the AI has to work on, the data sets that it has. And the new music having just gone in, it doesn't get pushed to the front. And therefore, from the statistics that we as a company see, we see a huge problem with pushing new music. And that's also one reason why UMG has recently come to a new arrangement with Deezer. We hope that's just a start. We are also in talks with all the other big platforms where where Deezer will pay twice as much if you pull down the music. In other words, if it's not the algorithm pushing the music to you, you requested for the music, then the artists and the right holders get paid twice as much. So there's something that, and we hold patents, AI patents, right? Largely again in this field. In short form video, for example, we are able to use AI to identify what is really moving in the social media platforms and use that to help our artists, to push their music. We have entered into deals with various AI companies. I'll come back to them with Handle, with YouTube. And as I mentioned, AI offers a lot of opportunities, but at the same time, also a lot of risks. And aside from the copyright risks that we face, there is also the cheap content oversupply. Earlier, Sarona mentioned about more than 100,000 tracks being uploaded daily. A huge bulk of that is rain, it is the sound of birds chirping, it is the sound of motor engines, whatever, turns you on. It's a huge part of that, and it is currently priced the same as a song written by Taylor Swift. And you can imagine that is a major problem for us as a company. How can it be? I mean, when you buy a Mercedes and when you buy some other brand, obviously the starting pricing is already different, but in the music space, no, your price is the same. It's just down to how many streams you get, which cannot be the sole determinant of how an artist is paid. So of course, when we look at AI, we are extremely concerned that the artist is being pushed to the side. And our focus, therefore, is ensuring that this new technology is ethical, it is artist-centric, and it will benefit right holders and artists and the ecosystems. And in this connection, we have been one of the prime movers behind a campaign called the Human Artistry Campaign. I have listed down the 7 principles at the end of our presentation, but I urge you to go on to their website if you have not already heard of this or done so, and support this. Let me then split the issues into 2 parts, the input side and the output side. On the input side, the question has already been the point has already been made by Bob. Does it mean that all the information, all the content that is being ingested by these data companies, does it mean it should be free? Should it be free? And of course, from a content owner's perspective, our position obviously is that it cannot be free, because then why would we even want to invest in developing those content? Unfortunately, the laws in a number of countries have already made that so. And therefore, we are fighting in some territories a rearguard battle to try to reverse those laws, because in some cases, say in the case of Japan, the first iteration was passed in 2009, where generative AI, hadn't really existed as such. You can see that the earlier forms of this form of AI was never anything in this format that we've seen. And therefore, our position is, obviously, when the content goes in to teach these models, you must secure permission, you must make adequate compensation for that use. And then on the output side, and I think we're going to have a lot of discussions on that, how should those output be protected? if at all, and under what kind of legislations. And you have heard mentioned there are other aspects, other kinds of laws that can be put into play, not just copyright law. Our basic position is we should embrace generative AI to the extent that it respects copyright law and the creative community. We back what we call responsible AI, empowering artists with access to AI tools so that they can, be even more creative and to have fair compensation. And we are developing those relationships. I have mentioned earlier, we have entered into an arrangement with Endel. Endel produces functional music, but we're getting Endel to get the music of artists, based on that to produce the functional music that you want to listen to. It has been announced about a month ago, we entered into an arrangement with YouTube, something called the YouTube AI Incubator. And I think, the crucial point, and I'll come back to this arrangement with YouTube, the crucial point in this whole arrangement is that YouTube undertakes to respect copyright, undertakes what we call an opt-in arrangement. Because the laws in some countries now is, let's say in the EU, is an opt-out arrangement. That means you are automatically in and everybody can use your data without your permission if you don't opt out. Now, why should that be so? In most cases, if you want to touch my property, you ought to get my permission first before it gets into the system, right? So I think that is what we're trying to arrange. Now, this has already been mentioned. Our key worry, as I said, is governments have already, in some countries, enacted laws, what we call text and data mining exceptions, that permits the ingestion of all this content for free. And in this case, I mentioned Japan, and unfortunately the country I come from, Singapore. In the case of Singapore, I think it's far worse because you cannot void it by contract, you cannot void it by making sure that your law is governed by another jurisdiction. If you put that in your contract, it's void. In Japan, you can still do that. So if you want to avoid, that outcome, I can make the law of America apply, for example, and I could perhaps have some form of protection. And that is our main concern, because right now we have heard easily more than a dozen governments say, you know what, we're going to have to regulate AI. Now when we talk about regulating AI, here we're talking about music. The governments of the world is not looking at music. Music is a very, very small subset of the whole AI discussions, right? There's pharmaceuticals, there's medicine, there's everything. And in the scheme of things, we're going to be forgotten. We're going to be pushed aside. And that is our main concern and worry, right? That's going to happen to us. So we are reaching out to governments. I just came back from a visit to Japan, extremely concerned with the position they're taking. I have spoken numerous times with the Singapore government. We're going to speak again, and we're hoping to get them to reverse or at least make sure that the parameters for the use has to be marked out very, very clearly. Because obviously, if all the ingestion is free, our industry is going to be badly affected. And the Japanese government basically said that, well, you can control everything with the output side. I said, I think that is a very narrow point of view. You have to look at things from a bigger angle, right? So these are the 7 principles that you can find. I think the key principle really that I want to mention is governments should not create new copyright or other IP exceptions that allow the developers to exploit all this content without permission, without license. And that on the output side, protection should only be given where there is human involvement in the generation of that output. If it's a purely AI generated, as we have seen Bob show us, then it shouldn't be protected under copyright law. Now, we make no comment about whether it should be protected under any other law in relation to the investments that have gone in, or they shouldn't be under copyright law. And in the interest of time, that is where I'll stop. I'm happy to take questions and discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to actually go to Young-Hoo, and I want you to kind of share your insights about this generative AI in terms of like how it changes the way we create music. I know you've been working in the industry as like composer, a K-pop composer and producer for a long time. And you're also working as AI like software engineer. So when you see these changes, like how AI changes the way we make and experience this new music, like what concerns you the most? And then also, if you can kind of explain like how actually AI changes the way like the composer or producer work these days.
Yeah, so nowadays, so when I started out, it was just me just sitting in front of a computer, started with the chord progression, coming with the melody line, and then write the lyrics on top of that, and then try to put more arrangement, all done by myself. It'll take about a week to 2 weeks to make a song. I'm a slow songwriter, so, but at the same time, that's how a lot of the Korean songwriters were working, and I was taught by, my 선배s, about how to do those kind of things. Now that has drastically changed. That's not how it's done anymore. No one really writes a song by themselves. So when you go to a writing session, you're sitting with 3 to up to sometimes 7 writers in a studio. Everyone takes out a phone, starts ChatGPT, and okay, what are we gonna write about? Okay, let's write about this and that, and then they'll just input and see what comes out first. But at the same time, no one will ever copy what the ChatGPT will write because it's predictable lyrics. So it's a tool that we use to spark some ideas or to get it going. So in that sense, there's AI side, it's very helpful for songwriting. So nowadays, when you go to this writing camp, these people write 8 songs in 7 days. It churns out, it's like a machine, factory. It's like, that's why these A&Rs at SM, they're complaining. We're getting 300 to 400 songs a week. We barely have time to listen to everything, so sometimes I listen to 5 seconds and I skip. because of this technology, the advancement, it's so easy to create music that it's just pouring out. And it's also with the solo creators who put their music on Spotify. Now that's why there's so much music coming out on every daily. And then what we do is we do use some Voicify, for instance. I recently worked with a rapper for a demo guide. Not a rapper, she was a singer, but she wasn't a great rapper. So I did use Nicki Minaj's voice on top of it. Sounded much better. So that's how we send out demos now. Sometimes I use The Weeknd, sometimes there's even a Korean voices out there, like Haechan from NCT. His voice, you can actually use that, and that actually helps for companies like SM to hear, how would this sound with my artist, our artist, So it helps in that sense. Now, when you play that the text to music AI, I was very relieved. The reason why is because it wasn't so great. Yeah, because I'm sure in the far future, if we have a massive data sets with inputting a lot of stuff, it'll get to somewhere. But what I think is it's always going to be step behind, because music is about unpredictable. Music is about creativity, something new, something inspiring. And that's something it's really hard to replicate. And not only that, I feel like AI-generated music doesn't have the soul or the story of the creator. And I think that is sort of the value of this art that comes out and that touches people because it's written by people that has stories and that wants to express their, experiences, and that's how we connect each other. I mean, obviously, with the AI development, you can mimic that, but then where's the value in that? Like, for instance, you can input Van Gogh's image a million times, and AI will generate beautiful Van Gogh picture, but is that worth $500 million? You know what I'm saying? So, in that sense, it's a half and half. Now, my worry would come from music makers who does create like a background music, or music like some background music on videos or whatnot. They will be worried. Yeah, that's how I feel at the moment.
Great, thank you. Then let's go to Professor Connor. Oh.
Pull my slides up. Okay, so, Young, I left where you left that off is perfect. And I think KT and some of what you're talking about as well is, let's talk about humans contribute, if anything, in the future. So we have these great tools. We can churn out music that sounds passably good. It'll get better over time. So as humans, do we add anything, or are we just going to kind of give up the game? My argument is that no, we contribute style. We contribute interesting new ways of presenting music. Drake and The Weeknd and Nicki Minaj, why do we want to use their voices to try to sell these songs? Well, because they have a certain style that we like. Now, can AI come up with those new styles? Maybe, but not quite yet. Right now, it just works off what it has, and that's looking backwards into the past. So, let me see if my clicker works here. It does not work. Thank you. There we go. Okay, so we've talked about some of this already. I don't have to rehash what's going on with AI, but let's distinguish two things. I have a very limited amount of time because we're trying to get back on schedule. I will try not to speed talk. I grew up in the Boston area, spent a lot of time in New York, and if you get me going, I will do the light speed talking, but I'm going to try not to do that. Let's distinguish two kinds of style. Performative style from compositional style. Now, I'm making these terms up. I don't know if they exist otherwise, but they're really, but we know them in the sense of performative style is what we want when we're thinking about the Drake singing, Drake singing a certain song, or, Nicki Minaj singing it, or in the mashups that Bob had, is it Johnny Cash or is it somebody else? Is it Aretha Franklin or is it Jenny? Now, I want to point out, though, Bob, I want to quibble a little bit, that I think in the clips you played, all of them sounded like Jenny's timbre of her voice. It had the tonal characteristics. If that program held one note, it would sound more like Jenny than Madonna or Bob Dylan. But what you are correctly noting is the phrasing is quite different. The phrasing was all Bob Dylan, and it's an odd phrase. It's not odd, it's great. That's what you like about Bob, if you like Bob Dylan. Jenny has her own phrasing, so Jenny's phrasing gets lost in all that, but not the timbre of her voice. Okay, but that's all performative style. We've had that around for a long time. If you want to protect performative style, we can already through sound recording rights and what in the US are called publicity rights, rights of publicity. And you may hear the term, especially from the US, NIL, name, image, likeness. We have a line of cases in the US called sound-alike. So if you put somebody in the studio and you say, try to sound exactly like famous singer X, and they do, then famous singer X can sue. Because it's not a copyright issue, but you have, as we call it in legal terms, misappropriated her voice, that singer's voice, and so that's actionable. So we don't need new law for that. That's protectable. Compositional is different. The style of songwriting. Now, in the songs written by committee, and Young, I'm interested in your perspective on this, sometimes, and this is me as a more traditional, like, I do write songs by myself. I try to have my own style. It wasn't a good enough style, that's why I'm here and not performing music anymore. But in the committee ones, I wonder if there's as much unique style of one particular person in the songwriting as there might be otherwise. Now you take someone like global enough Ed Sheeran, people have heard Ed Sheeran. I would argue a lot of Ed Sheeran's success is his songs. It's the composition of his songs, not just that he's the one performing it. So you know it's compositional style if someone else performs the song and it's still a hit, it's a great song. And you can recognize the way people compose songs. That's a harder one. That's not really protected right now. It's not protected by the rights of publicity or anything. And so my argument is going to be that we should, in fact, protect that style. So I'm working on a proposal. I published some things already on this. And so I want to quickly, though, before people get nervous, if we protect compositional style, is that going to protect too many things? Is it going to prevent people from writing new kinds of songs? No, if you follow another distinction I make between genre and style. So by style, I mean personally identifiable style. So pick whatever genre of music you like. If it's K-pop, like we're talking about today, if it's rock and roll from back in the US or England, blues, jazz, whatever it is. Pick your genre of music that you personally listen to. You can identify the differences between not just different singers, but different composers when you know a genre. If you don't know a genre, you don't care as much, it all sounds the same, okay? But within each genre, you can recognize personal compositional styles. That's what I mean by style. Not the genre overall, but where you can recognize somebody's individual touch. I already mentioned this. For the performative side, we're covered. Compositional, we're not. There's a big famous case that just happened about visual art, the Andy Warhol Foundation case in the US. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through what happened with it, but what I find fascinating is that between the majority and the dissent, they're actually arguing about style, I argue. Okay, so now let me get right to, in the interest of time, the proposal itself. The proposal then is that, here we go. If we draw compositional style narrowly and say it really is what's recognized as a particular composer's style, okay, then we should be able to protect that. In the past, people argued we couldn't because it was too ephemeral. What did style mean? It's not captured anywhere. It's not tangible expression. A particular written song can be protected because we can identify it and say, there's the song. If you replicate that song, then it's a problem. But when you look in some of the cases in the US, we do protect style, written style, across a few different works. So we have to narrowly tailor it and say it's just that person's particular style. And then, on the last side here, we then don't worry about whether we're cutting off incentives for other composers to develop their new style, because the point is it actually incentivizes them to create something new. Because if they're just copying someone else's style, and no true artist really wants to do that, where's your voice? Your new voice, you want to sound different. So just because you're inspired by earlier composers and you can hear a touch of the earlier compositional styles in your work, so long as you're creating something new, which is what we want from human artists, we want that new vision, that new kind of composition, then you will not run afoul of somebody else's rights. So I think that we can actually protect compositional style, not worry about cutting off new forms of music, but rather it will double the incentive for people to come up with new compositional styles. I'll end on that note. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And yeah, let's go to the audience. If you have any question, this is your opportunity to ask experts. And Eric?
Yes, I have a...
Actually, please.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So I have a question, primarily, I guess, for Young, so another place where AI is really has become influential and is being sold as the future of music is in the context of production and mixing And the idea is, now there are a number of companies that sell software suites that essentially you can put in your digital audio workstation, which is kind of like software that replicates an entire recording studio from the past, and you can, and the software will essentially mix your record for you, right? And so we'll use compression and equalization and reverb, and it can kind of pick the optimal settings for those based on what it recognizes in the tracks. And there are lots of YouTube videos now that say, mix engineers are going to be out of a job in 5 years because this is no longer something we need a human element involved with. And I'm curious, because you're also a mix engineer and a producer, they do this with mastering as well. There are online mastering services. You can upload your track. You don't have a human mastering engineer listening and adjusting and tweaking. It's all done through AI software. Does that concern you?
So I have used products like Isotope Neutron, which uses AI engine to mix and master. But I don't think it's there yet. Yeah, I never actually finished a song using that software. Part of that is because mixing and mastering process is also a creative process. And when you're mixing, sometimes you add more stuff, you try to create a certain, harmonics or whatnot, and I mean, it could mimic, for instance, I want to sound like Justin Bieber's whatever song. It will try to mimic, but not at the professional level. Because some of the mixing engineers that I admire, and their process is very creative to achieve certain sonic quality, because you have to understand the music to really mix, to drive that emotion. So, I don't know, maybe if we have more trained data in the future, it's too early to say, but for the next 5 to 10 years, I'm not that worried about mixing engineering being replaced by AI. Maybe for amateurs or hobbyists who wants to use those software to quickly get some mix out of it, yeah, that'll be a great product for that. But professional mixing engineer, that is an artistry. Yeah, so that will always stay.
Thank you. Anyone else back there? Please, can you pass the microphone?
Thank you. It was really great hearing all of your points of view, and I think this is mostly aimed towards KT, but I'm wondering, one of the biggest problems that you acknowledged is the input coming into most of the data, and having worked with people in AI fields, I know they're not inclined to worry too much about the copyright of what they're using for training, and policy isn't always fast moving, and you were mentioning that companies can also be aware of trying to only work with companies or software that follows copyright with input. So I was wondering, from the perspective of labels or creators, how can you control for using AI software that has been ethically trained? How can you hopefully try to avoid using stuff that's been trained unethically?
Well, our approach has been multi-pronged. I mentioned about our deal with YouTube. So we're entering the market as quickly as we can and trying to establish legal practices. And if you have been following, say, the debate in Australia, in fact, Google took a position where you should only opt out, right? But then YouTube did a deal with us 2 weeks after that and said, well, it is working on it doesn't say in those words, but the outcome is that the Frank Sinatra estate, Bjorn from ABBA and so on, they opted in. So they were working on an opt-in arrangement. So we're trying to establish industry practice. We're trying to get the companies who are working in this field to get the necessary licenses to get it done. Now, obviously, of course, for every one company that follows the law, you're going to have 10 that probably won't. And in that regard, we have, and that's where legislation and policy is important, because if the government enacts a law which says, you know what, actually all the input is free, the battle is lost. So that's why now we're trying to persuade government, please don't enact legislation that quickly. Yes, you have other concerns, but be mindful, right? So that's one thing we're working on. The second aspect, of course, if the law doesn't change, then, because let me just explain the situation. So in the case of let's say, United States, where you say you want to argue, fair use, it is on the user to make that argument. Whereas in the case of Singapore, it's now the reverse. The law says actually all free. So now it's for the rights owners to say actually you're breaking the law. The whole process has been stood on its head. So that's what we're trying to avoid on the policy side, on the legislation side. And then of course with those users that still refuse to comply, unfortunately we have no choice but to look at how to bring legal action. And as you know, the cases already running all over the place. He's very happy. I'm sure he's handling some, right? We have no choice but to litigate. So we are working on a lot of fronts to make sure that, unlike the last time around where we got really badly beaten, this time around we're using a mix of measures to try to have a much better outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the question from George Huang. Over here.
Hi. One question for KT, because I asked you just now during lunch and you would rather talk about it now, is can we have no authorship but yet still have ownership? The other one is, I want to ask Professor Seán O'Connor, in the case of misappropriation, I come from a jurisdiction which has passing off. As long as you are transparent about it, then there would be no confusion and therefore no passing off. What about in the US?
Yeah, actually I'm going to try to pass it off to there are more qualified people than me to answer that question. But having said that, I would say that in the case that Bob gave, where there is no human input, our position is that it shouldn't be protected by copyright law. But whether some other piece of legislation, some other kind of common law should apply, the possibility always exists, right? That I think in some legislations there's the concept of computer-generated works that are given protection. But as I said, there are loads of professors here who can probably answer that question much better than me. Thank you.
So I'll actually take the question you addressed to me. So while I mentioned that trademark, Lanham Act in the US could be one thing used for vocal sound-alikes, that's not the basis of our cases in the US. They're just straight on tort misappropriation, and they're called sound-alike cases. And they were just fascinating. They had a judge saying, we think that the human voice is distinctive enough that it's like doing a replication of someone's face, and that's prohibited under right of publicity. What's right of publicity, for those who don't know in the audience, it's that if I'm a known celebrity, and you know how celebrities are selling things, selling musical equipment, selling whatever they sell related to their field, they get endorsements. And so there's a protection, well, even under the Lanham Act too, that's outside of regular trademark, and it says if you make it look like that famous person is affiliated with your product, then that misappropriates their endorsement rights, essentially. And so even if you're transparent about it, but it still is, if somebody just listening to it thinks that it's that singer, then you have a problem, and it can still be enforced.
Thank you. Oh, Bob, yes.
Well, the other question I think you raised was, can you have ownership without authorship? In the U.S., the Copyright Office has just taken the position that computer-generated work is not copyrightable, period. And there was a court case, someone actually challenged that ruling of the Copyright Office, and there was a decision in August where a court upheld the Copyright Office and said there's a human authorship requirement under U.S. copyright law, and you cannot have a copyright in a computer-generated work. So that case is still on appeal, and it'll be kicking around for another year or two, I think, probably. But I think that's probably right, at least under U.S. law, that's probably correct.
I think I want to springboard off that. What might be interesting in the U.S. and Commonwealth countries that have the Anglo common law, I just thought of this in the spur of the moment, so it's probably wildly wrong. You can't protect something that has no human author under U.S. copyright law, but could you try to use a general law of misappropriation because this is a valuable product? Now, without getting into U.S. constitutional law too quickly, there's a doctrine called preemption that if the U.S. Congress has said something, we are ruling in this area, we're putting legislation out rather, not ruling, and we want this to be the sum total of the law. So if Congress says, if it's not protected under the Copyright Act, then it's excluded and states no one else can try to protect it otherwise. But AI generated works are so new, it's not clear that they are excluded. So could states try to start saying we're going to give some other sui generis, what we call just sort of a made-up one-off protection for it? That might be the way some of this goes.
Thank you. Due to the limited time, we have to go to the next session. So we'll take 10-minute break and then we'll move to the next session. So, actually I forgot to say, please give them a round of applause. Thank you. And also, they will be available to answer your question during the break and during the dinner and after the conference. So feel free to kind of bug them. Thank you.